As we prepare for the holidays and the new year, many of us focus on celebrating with family and reflecting on our friendships. In that spirit, we invite you to a discussion on what it means to have best friends at work. Welcome to the Thoughtful Talent Show.
Hi, I'm Jen Werner of Jen Werner Coaching.
And I'm Chad Ahern of Talent and Teams Consulting.
And as Chad said, we are celebrating the holiday. This episode is just going to be just a little bit different because it's inspired by two questions we often hear from individuals and leaders as it pertains to the Q12 assessment question, I have a best friend at work. And those two questions we get most often are, do I really need a best friend at work? And how much of a bestie does this person really need to be?
Okay, so I'm going to jump right in here, and we need to clarify this word best, because it's often what inspires most of the questions that I know I get in a lot of my workshops when it comes to talking about employee engagement. And I'll just share right off the bat that Gallup has actually done a lot of work around this word. I know it may seem like a small thing or a big thing to make such a deal out of a small word, but it's actually the word that catches people the most sort of off guard. And the research that Gallup has done is that when they remove the word best or substitute it with the word close or good friend, they actually found that the validity of the statement or the impact of the statement within the Q12 assessment essentially lost almost all of its meaning in terms of actually measuring employee engagement. So the word best is used quite intentionally here. And because it is used so intentionally, Jen and I want to spend some time unpacking that and helping people understand that this is, it doesn't have to be your best friend at work or the best friend in the world, but you do need somebody at work that you can go to. And Jen, I know that you came up with some great thoughts on sort of what does it mean to be a bestie at work and why is this so important? Why are we talking about this?
Yeah, in short, Chad, you need someone in your corner, right? So like that's where we're coming from with this best friend at work. So I honestly do think you do need a bestie because let's be honest, the best jobs, even the best jobs have some pretty terrible days. Maybe a customer was really upset and just completely unloaded on you. Maybe you made a really big mistake and you just want to talk about it, have somebody not pile on with the shame, maybe just sit with you as I've done, cry, vent, whatever that might be, whatever that looks like to you when you make a mistake, that you have somebody that if somebody just badmouthed you, you know that your coworker is going to have your back. Be like, yeah, that's not really what happened. And maybe even if you have your boss and we talked about this the other day, we have our boss who gives credit for your good work to somebody else. You need to have somebody to talk to about that. And then maybe you have some office mean girls and they're extra mean today. I seriously could just go on and on because honestly, this is my subject. Like the toxicity experienced in the workplace, this is like my coaching specialty. It's, as they say, my jam. I've worked in great and not so great spaces. And I can tell you what separates them and your ability to overcome some of these challenges really is knowing that you have a best friend at work.
Yeah.
Without this, and any number of like work upsets can turn an okay day into I need to find a new job.
Yeah. And I, like you, have been in those places. I've had really great places to work. My very first employment was probably one of the best team experiences. It was because I had not just one, but several best friends at work that you could count on, that I could go to with questions. One of the things that as you were talking about, I thought about, the instances where you have sort of like that quote unquote dumb question, or you just kind of have that, your mind fails you for a second and you're like, how am I supposed to do something? And asking to be reminded of something you've done probably 100 times before about how to do it again. You want somebody that is going to be understanding and willing to work with you without being super judgmental. And so I agree with a lot of what you're saying, because I've also worked in some places that I really didn't feel like I connected with anybody or anybody really had my back. And those are the jobs that I was looking for the door, within a year or so, because there just wasn't the support system. So I agree with a lot of what you're saying, and I think the stats actually kind of back that up. You know that I
Oh,
always look
nice.
to bring stats to our conversations.
Yeah.
So what was interesting is that as I was looking into this topic, I actually found data from kind of three really meaningful periods in which Gallup has done some initial research and then validity around it. So if you go back and look at the original research, and I'm sure you can find all the metadata, but I'm going to bring out sort of some key stats that Gallup observed when people report that they did have a best friend at work. 43% of people were more likely to report having received praise and recognition for their work in the last 7 days. And I know you and I have talked about recognition on a previous
Yep.
episode, so that's really important. So 35% more likely to report coworkers are committed to doing quality work, and 21% were more likely to report that at work they have the opportunity to do what they do best. I know as strengths coaches that
Right.
that's my jam, right? That's where
Yes.
I like. That's where I see employee engagement and strengths really kind of,
Yeah.
that's the nexus, right? The opportunity
Yeah.
to do what we do best.
Chad, tell
But
me
that's from the original research. What's that?
remind me the timing on that original research.
So around 98, 99,
Okay.
the post I actually found this from was dated 1999.
Okay.
And that's when you see a lot of the work around like the book 12, the 12 great elements of leadership come out from Gallup is right around that time. So
Okay.
this is when they were really starting to
Great.
put a lot of emphasis on the difference between employee engagement versus employee satisfaction. Gallup
Yeah.
was kind of leading the charge about employee engagement, how you get the best out of people.
Yep.
So that was
Good.
1999.
Okay.
If you move forward about 20 years, Gallup also did some research. As they always do, they like to make sure that their methodologies are correct.
Yep.
And so you go back and you find another set of awesome stats. In 2019, 37% more likely people were more likely to report someone encourages their development in the workplace. 28% are more likely to report someone has talked to them about their progress in the last 6 months, and 27% were more likely to report that their opinions seem to count at work,
Oh,
which is
yeah.
also another employee engagement measure. So
Yeah.
there is a tie over, an intersection of these that's really important. So that was 2019. Well, we know what happened in 2020, right after that, right? We had a big massive pandemic, and then Gallup
Yes.
kind of went back to the board again. So more recently, earlier this year, Gallup did some research and found that when asked about this question about having a best friend at work, well, they didn't provide as many stats. They did mention that employees who had a best friend at work were significantly more likely to engage customers and internal partners on a regular basis, get more done in less time, report, report a safe working environment with fewer accidents, innovate and share ideas faster, have fun while at work. And then also they found that the social support of having a best friend at work actually made the challenging times of the pandemic easier on people. So
Yep.
there's a long-standing importance to this statement of having a best friend at work, and the importance of having, as you called it, a bestie
Right.
that can be around you to not only support you in the times that you kind of talked about being bad mouthed or making a mistake or taking undue credit. It's also a place where you can actually find a lot of success by having that person. You're much more likely to be more successful, more productive, more engaged. So this really does have an importance, and that's why I know that's why you and I wanted to talk about this and share our thoughts with our listeners.
Yeah.
With that, I've given a little bit of a hint on my personal take on this. What is your take on the statement and just sort of your general sense of this?
Yeah, I think the differentiator between like who's your friend versus like your best friend at work is this like shared perspective, say, because I'm not sure necessarily that you pick your best friend at work. I almost feel like someone becomes your best friend at work, or at least personally for me, like this has happened out of things we're working on together and things we're experiencing together. They have knowledge, this other person has knowledge of like the workplace norms and the other players. It's like it's not the same as when you tell your husband or your wife about whatever happened at work today, because they're like, who was that again? Did I meet them? It's like, okay, never mind. Whereas, your best friend at work, that's someone who already has like some of that background knowledge. I think they tend to have some empathy for you and your role. They either understand the struggles you're going through or have done that in the past. They work with you and see and appreciate you and your strengths and how you're able to do what you do best. I think they will listen and respond without judgment. Sometimes they might tell you a different perspective that maybe you need to see. But that's the thing. Like, you can take that from a best friend at work. You can take that from someone who knows you, knows what you do best, has seen your accomplishments, is there to like encourage and celebrate you. You can take that, maybe you should do this next time, or did you think about this perspective? You could take that easier when you trust that person and you have that relationship. The other one I really like is that this person might actually be your voice if you get lost in the crowd. Like, if you get shoved aside, like if what you're saying, you're not, and Chad does this with me a lot, what you're saying isn't coming out exactly clear, or you're like looking around the room and you get blank faces, and your bestie might know exactly what you mean because they've been with you and talked to you about this idea you've had. And so they may be able to, kind of glom on and be like, oh yeah, and we could do this, this, and this. This person wants the best for you. Even if that means you leaving the job. Like, I think that's like a big one. Like, they don't want to lose you, but they also want the best for you.
Yeah. I would have to go back to something you just said. I appreciate the statement there at the very end about wanting the best. But I would actually want to expand on the statement you said about, speaking for you even while you're in the room, or maybe rephrasing something so that maybe what you're trying to say is clearer, and it's coming through kind of I won't say mouthpiece, but it's coming through somebody else's voice.
Yep.
I would expand that to actually also extend to when you're not in the room.
Oh, absolutely.
That a good friend would step in and say, hey, this perspective from my good friend is really worth considering.
Yeah.
He or she knows what she's talking about. We should be listening to X, Y, and Z. And not just from I'm an expert kind of perspective, but that your best friend, whether that's male or female, your best friend is trying to contribute their best. And while they may not be present, whether they're sick, maternity leave, weren't initially invited, but now realizing maybe their perspective should be in the room, your best friend is there to help advocate for your perspectives, and share what knowledge they know you have. So I really like a lot of the points you made. I want to expand that one because I think it's worth noting that really good friends will say, hey, I'm speaking on behalf of, but this is the idea, or this is the information you need to be aware of. This is what you're going to find from this person when you leave this meeting. So I'm going to come in on this. There's a lot of, the reason why I wanted to talk about this with you is that I think there's a lot of debate right now with the changing nature of work around, well, should you even have friends at work? Should it just be a transactional experience because people, are disengaged, what's it called? Gallup just came out with this new term. It's not the great resignation. It's the great detachment. I think it's the great detachment, right? It's work is work, home is home. You go in, you do your thing, 9 to 5, clock in, clock out, and leave. And in that conversation, a lot of people go, well, my coworkers are just my coworkers. I go in, I work with them as I need to, and then I leave. Okay, valid point for some. I am going to politely disagree with those people and offer my perspective is that I think you do need to have a best friend at work. And this is, I know that you and I are sort of preaching the choir, but we're coming at this from different places and different perspectives.
Agreed.
But that I land on the side of you should develop friendships. Just going through the motions gets really isolating. I think that's one of the things that we're seeing not only with Gallup's research, but there are a bunch of other organizations talking about the isolation issue in the workplace. I actually just happened to catch a CBS News report talking about isolation, particularly among men, of not being able to develop friendships, not being able to develop deep relationships. It's a bigger issue than just the workplace, but we can start to find some of those connections in the workplace because we're already there
Yep.
8, 10 hours every day. Do you have to hang out with them outside of work? Not necessarily, but you might.
Right.
This does not have. I had one person in a workshop ask me, "Well, does this have to be like my best friend ever?" No, I didn't say it was. I just said that they should be one of
At
those
work.
really
Yeah.
core people to you, especially when you're in the workplace. That it's not a requirement that you hang out with them afterward or have them be your best man or your maid of honor at your wedding. It's just you need
Right.
somebody, as you said, in your corner, willing to advocate for you on a regular basis.
Hmm.
Um, I think the other point that I've heard, and another reason why this has come up recently for me, is I've had some leaders, that have recently been appointed to leadership roles say, well, I didn't really want to become friends with my coworkers because if I did get this position, now I'm in charge of leading my quote unquote friends. I really don't want to have that experience right now or in the future. So I'm going to keep them at arm's length. Again, I think that leads to a lot of disengagement. And in my opinion, really good friends, especially if they're
Yeah.
advocating for you already, should hopefully be happy for you that you got
Oh,
promoted, that is the best
absolutely.
thing for you, that you are moving in the direction that you want to be moving and that you've been
Yeah.
asked to do something and that you've wanted to take it on. They should be happy for you. If they're
Yeah.
not, maybe there's a conversation to be had about the relationship, but
Right.
that's different than keeping people so far at arm's length because you think you might get promoted. I think that's going to become a very isolating, very lonely workplace in the long
Yeah.
run.
Yeah, I'm so glad you brought that up because that was where my lean went when we like talked about that we were going to do this and have this conversation. I instantly went to that place of like, one, who's your bestie and who's got your like best interests in mind, and how will they advocate for you or be happy for you. And my very last statement was, even if that means you're leaving the job, I also think that means even if that means you're now their boss, they would like, I'm sorry, but I think if my best friend at work now became my boss, that would be amazing because she already knows exactly what I do well. She knows exactly what things to funnel my way that I'm going to just thrive at doing. That to me, that's a easy win-win-win like situation
Right.
there. The workplace is incredibly competitive, or it can be. And with managers and leaders, specifically some I've seen, they actually pit employees and against one another, either for
Oh,
presence, for praise, for promotions. This type of environment can make it so hard to look at coworkers and think of them like with this friendly lens. If you have a boss or someone who is, in order to get you to do your best or to be better, is telling you that so and so does it this way, man, like that, it's just like tearing you down. So, like, if you've encountered one of these like mean girls, like I talked about, or you've been stabbed in the back by a coworker in our past, I think it can be really difficult to know who you can trust and to have that best friend at work. So I do think it comes down to kind of a culture thing as well too. If you're pitted against one another, that's a problem. And I'm hoping we're going to get into that conversation when we get to the managers, and what they can do to make sure that we
yeah.
are, lifting everybody up. But I wanted to kind of circle back to that your best friend doesn't have to be somebody you hang out with after work. I have had lots and lots of best friends at work. And one right now, she lives in the clear other end of the country. I've physically seen her in person twice in 5 years. She's still
Yeah.
considered my best friend at work. And
Yeah.
and so it's like, they don't have to be somebody you're hanging out with regularly or whatever. And I don't even know if they need to have, like real intimate knowledge of like your family life and what you do and things going on at home. What that differentiator, like I said, really comes down to like whether they're in your corner and have your best, your needs, your what's best for you at heart. And I think you touched on a lot of those in yours too.
Just so it doesn't sound like to our listeners that you and I are echoing each other verbatim for each statement, I will slightly disagree with your statement about they don't need to know a ton of your, family
Intimate
life or
knowledge.
intimate knowledge of your personal life. I can see that to a point, but I do also think that there is a value to if they know something about what's going on out and
Sure.
around, what else is coming with you to work. So like I'm thinking of when I was with my previous employer and my kids were born and everything that went on with, helping take care of my pregnant wife. And then after the child was born, all the new childcare needs and trying to figure out my schedule. And I was coming in awfully tired because my kid wasn't sleeping, and love both my kids to death. But it was a lot. And I was a first
Yeah,
time
sure.
father. And, now I've got two. And so the second one was a little bit easier because I knew a little bit of what to say, but he's again a different kid.
Yeah.
But I also had other family things going on at the time, and the couple people that I really knew I could lean on and considered sort of best friends at work knew that about what was going on, because it wasn't just, I don't leave home
Yeah.
life at home as soon as I cross the threshold of the office door. That emotional, that even the energy level comes with you, and it's been impacted by the things that happen sort of out in the rest of the world outside the office. So
Sure.
I would slightly disagree with you in that I do think the true best friends do at least know a little bit. Now, again, this is going to come back to, what's your level of trust, what's your level of
Yes.
openness, and I know some of our talents play into that. And I know that's one place
Yeah.
that I know you and I have wanted to talk about is, how do talents play into this a little bit. Um, but I wanted to say that I think there is some value of your besties kind of knowing what's going on around you as a person, as they advocate for you, as they try and support you, as they
Right.
encourage you and support you to be your best. So I just wanted to
Yep.
make that point
I
real quick.
and I can agree with you to the people that I trust. Am
Yeah.
I opening that up to a brand new bestie? Oh no. I'm holding that
No.
for a while until I know that you're trustworthy. So 100% get where you're coming from, and it does deepen that relationship and then makes it easier for everybody, managers
Yeah.
included, to know what you're coming to work with. If
Yeah.
you're not getting any sleep at home because you got a brand new baby, yeah, you're probably not going to be at your best at work, and
Yeah.
maybe a little grace is needed. So
Yeah.
great point, Chad. Thank you.
Yeah. And as a small aside, can you hear Jen and I's deliberatives coming out? We're very cautious about opening up about who we are and what's
Yeah,
going on in our lives, because
right,
we're assessing risk. Um,
right.
I just
Well,
thought it
and
was an interesting. If
yeah,
people are listening for themes, this is where they come out.
yes.
So
Well, and relator at 8, like if you're in
yeah,
my inner circle, like everything, but if you're not in those like 5 people, yeah, sorry, you're only going to get so much.
yeah.
Yeah.
So since we sort of
Talent.
teed up the strengths conversation, we
Yeah.
are a talent, the thoughtful talent show. We are going to talk about strengths at some point.
Yep.
I'm curious, do you have a take on where talents come into this?
I
I know
I
I've got a
think
few ideas, but um,
yeah, I'm not sure I want to like necessarily pin anything to specific talents about who is or isn't your best friend at work based on their talents. I'm not sure that I've ever chosen my best friend at work based on their talents, so I can't put that there. But what I will say is that working with my clients, I regularly encourage them to use their talents, to build, earn, and keep trust.
yeah,
So using their talents to be respectful of others' ideas and their talents, to be a supportive and active listener. And we talk about active listening a lot. And encourage their thinking and their actions. Maybe even that's encouraging pausing before some actions happen. I've had a lot of, with my activator high, I've had a lot of besties at work remind me what I need to do right now is pause or pivot and put this energy into something else, because where I'm coming from right now might not be the best, for the situation. And I think if we're being really honest, it all comes down to like understanding our best friend at work should be someone who's trustworthy, who's respectful, who's supportive, who's encouraging, and can bring you hope. If you work
yeah,
in a place where you're not feeling a lot of hope for the future, if you have someone beside you who does, who sees it,
yeah.
who can give you a little bit of theirs as you grow in your hope for this is going to be okay and everything's, like I have a place here. If you have someone who has some of that hope already, that can be contagious.
It's I love all those words you just used. As you're listing them off, I got thinking about, it mirrors very closely the four needs of followers, right?
Yeah, it does,
You
right?
know, you know, for those that don't know, for the listeners that want to be educated on this, Gallup has found that there's really four needs of followers, and that's actually more important than studying certain models of leadership. If you're fulfilling those four needs of followers, you will have people naturally want to follow you. And the
Right.
needs that we're talking about are trust, compassion, stability, hope. And so you
Yeah.
heard a lot of those words come from Jen right now, right? You heard about the trust, heard about the compassion or the being encouraging. There's the hopefulness that matches up with the hopeful. And then I also think the stability, knowing that you have a supportive
Supportive and silly.
environment, respectful environment, kind of is akin to that compassion component. And also the stability. So it's just interesting that that sort of tied together. I hadn't really
Yeah.
thought about it in that exact lens as I was preparing for this, but it's definitely on point. And it would make sense that if you want to have a best friend, they're also going to want, if you're going to want to engage with them, then they're probably filling,
Yeah.
three or all four of those needs in some way. So I
And
think that's really,
if your manager isn't, having that best friend at work who is will keep you in this job a lot longer than if you didn't have someone there who is doing those things. So while we talk about, like Chad and I talk about this with our clients and the people that we work with, the companies we work with, about managers needing to meet those needs, it's also, if they're not meeting them now, how are they being met? Where are they getting some of those? But we're going off to managers, and I didn't mean to go there yet. Let's talk about talents, Chad. Share what you had. I'm excited to hear it.
I think we're kind of building on the same, structure here is, as I said, I hadn't really thought about the exact four needs of followers when I was putting together my thoughts on this topic.
Yeah.
But they do kind of overlap a little bit with what you just said. I first want to go back before I start talking about the needs and sort of my versions of them. I wanted to just throw out an idea. I know Jen said you've never really picked a best friend just based on their talents, right?
Right.
But I think you can often sort of naturally find them. I think that's the best phrase for what I'm about to outline, is that oftentimes when you get paired with people on certain projects, you may find you start to engage with them or feel a connection with them, because usually one of two things is happening. And these aren't the only two, but they're sort of the two key ones. One is that you found somebody that thinks very much like you, because they likely have talent themes that are very similar to you. So just to use Jen and I as an example, we happened to cross each other in a coaching circle and found that we had deliberative in common. And deliberative is a relatively rare theme. It's not the rarest, but it's not as, say, prevalent as, say, achiever, which is, I think, the number one.
And I would echo that with, I think it's kind of rare as far as coaches go. In our circle of coaches that we know, there aren't too many of them that have deliberative high like you and I do.
No. Yeah. And so we had a natural connection. We both kind of see the world in similar ways when we need to. Now, at the same time, Jen and I also, I think, have a great connection because of our dissimilar themes. And I would say that this is sort of the second iteration or version of maybe finding besties. You find somebody that is kind of your opposite. They match you in places where you're not strong. So Jen has very strong activator. I have very strong discipline. So Jen loves to jump first and see how it all works out. That's great. And I love that she pairs that with her deliberative. My analytical and my discipline are kind of the counter sides of that. Think it through, find the pattern. What's the structure around this before we just go jump?
Yep.
That makes us a good pair. And Jen and I have developed this podcast relationship and, has been able to support each other as coaches. So to a certain extent, Jen is one of my best friends at work. And I just use that as a model of, if our listeners are thinking about who are my best friends at work, or maybe I've just gotten into a new role and I'm trying to figure out who might be some good best friends. It might be worth, if you know their themes, think about who do you need to be paired with? Who is that best supportive person for you? Yeah. So that was my first comment. Now I want to sort of dive back into the four needs of followers kind of thread that we were having before. So when I think about how our themes can help us improve our relationships, improve our friendships, be that best friend, or maybe find that best friend, I'm gonna pile on with the trust, and I
Yeah.
picked out 4 themes to just kind of give a taste of what this could look like, and this goes to the 4 needs of followers conversation. But for the executing theme, I picked responsibility. If you know that your best friend is going to do what they say they're going to do, builds
Yep.
trust. If they know that you're going to do what you say you're going to do, that builds trust. So there's an intersection there. I think if you look at the relationship building theme, you've already brought it up. Relator are heavily interested in having those very close relationships. It is a core talent around building close relationships, so it can help with that building of trust. Self-assurance, I thought was one to just throw in the mix in terms of if you know yourself really well, then you can make it easier for others to get to know you and for you to know them. If you are genuine and kind of are confident in yourself, maybe you can even lend. I think we've even heard a coach talk about sort of lending that self-assurance to somebody else that builds trust, that builds connection. Um, and then maximizer, I picked for the influencing theme for um, building the kind of trust, best kind of trust between one another, the
Ah,
deepest possible kind of trust between one another. Um, so um, those are the 4 I
yeah, I
wanted to
love
pick out.
those.
Yeah, the other one that I wanted to build on, I think you used the word supportive. I used
Mm-hmm.
the phrase sounding board. So I was thinking about how our themes
Yeah.
can be really good sounding boards, right? Sometimes our best friend, we need to be able to go to them and just have them listen, right?
Yes.
Understand where we're coming from, unpack. We talked about venting before. Okay,
Yep.
so I thought about some themes around that. So empathy is really good at understanding, giving voices to the feelings that might be right below the surface of the actions. So maybe you're
Mm-hmm.
reacting to what somebody said or an action somebody took against you,
Yeah.
and empathy might be able to actually help you pull out the feelings and give voice to that. Um, Focus as a sounding board, making
Oh,
that person your sole
focus.
focus. You talked about active listening, having
Yeah.
somebody so focused on just kind of taking care of you or sort of wrapping you in that warm embrace of
Right.
friendship, right? I thought that was
Yeah, I
a
like
nice way to
that.
think about a theme that could help with sounding board. Um, I'm going to go back to self assurance a little bit and sort of that self confidence, uh,
Mm.
be able to provide to somebody else.
Yeah.
And you sound off about something, maybe you're deflated because you made a mistake. Somebody with self assurance maybe can lend you their self assurance and say, hey, it might not be quite as bad as you think it is. You're really a pretty qualified professional. You know what you're doing. You just made this one goof. Okay, let's
Right.
build you back up again.
Yeah.
Um,
Oh, I love that.
yeah, and then I'm going to pick on one of my own, Learner. As a sounding board, I always found that I often serve my friends by being a really good, like, I just keep asking questions. So asking them questions to clarify what their thinking is. What are they thinking about doing next? How do they think they got in this situation? So being a sounding board and using Learner, and I'm sure there's some other themes that can help with that in terms
Sure.
of providing some support to a best friend. And then the other component, and I think you used the word encouraging. I'm going to use
Hmm.
being an advocate. Right? We talked about
Oh,
how
yeah.
a best friend will sometimes advocate whether you were in the room or not.
Yep.
So I thought I'd throw out some themes for that. So to be a really good advocate and be a best friend, maybe you lean on significance, the influencing theme. Their success is my success. I've heard that from a couple coaches that have significance. If I can
Yep.
build somebody else up, I know I'm doing good work. I'm leaving a legacy, and I'm going to help support this person. So their success is my success,
Oh,
and vice
good.
versa.
Yep.
Developer, surprise, surprise, developer of the relationship building domain. You see the potential in others. If you're going to be their advocate, you got to see their potential. You got to be able to speak to it, and then also help them get there. And then achiever, the executing, taking
Okay.
actions to support each other.
Yes.
So again, maybe you'd even lean, I don't know if you want to speak to your activator, if that would maybe be a place where, be an advocate, getting things started for somebody
Mm-hmm.
or helping them push, push those first couple steps.
Yep.
Um, and then what domain haven't I touched on?
Influence. Strategic
Oh,
thinking, I guess.
strategic thinking. You know what? I actually didn't come up with one as strategic thinking. I'm sure there is one. The other one
Sometimes
I
it can
wanted
be strategic
to
thinking.
mention was positivity, believing the best
Hmm.
about other people.
Yeah.
If you're going to be their advocate, think about, how are they best? Um, and then you could even pair that with maybe something like Maximizer, which we've already talked a little bit about.
Right.
Help them
Take
become
the
great.
good from great. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
So,
so
so,
I love those, Chads, and I just had a thought in the being an advocate in the strategic thinking domain. I instantly went to like ideation, and using your
oh,
ideation,
yeah.
as your friend might like have some idea about something and nobody else is quite understanding what we're going to do with that or how that's going to work, and maybe futuristic even, or ideation might be able to like give like some voice to some of those ideas, some different things that you have going, or see the future, like see
Yeah.
how this is going to impact like what we're going to do, how your friend's idea was going to impact something.
Yeah.
So yeah, I love those. Those are great. Those are great
Yeah. So
examples.
I just, as we're in a strengths-based conversation, I thought I'd throw out
Yeah.
some specific examples for people if they're thinking about,
Yeah, I love them.
how can they be a best friend to people, look at their top five. And I
Right.
would, also offer this as a sort of a challenge, a coaching challenge moment of, if you've got your top five or your top 10, think about which of those help you be a best friend to others.
Yeah.
And then also maybe how can those themes help you build, support a best friend or build up a best friend? Um,
Great. Great
so
questions.
yeah. Um, Now that
All
we're
right.
talking about themes, I know
Yeah.
you've mentioned already, you've alluded to a few times, and we wanted to get to, okay, how can leaders help
Yes.
build better relationships and encourage best friends at work and those sorts
Yeah.
of relationships? Um, why don't you lead us off? What are your thoughts?
Okay.
You've already teased up a few. Let's
Well,
flesh them out.
so I'm not sure how far you want me to go and if you want me to just like take it and run. But I'll start with like I think managers need to encourage team successes based on these partnerships. So if they see people working well together, encourage that and maybe give them more things to do so that you're encouraging that team success and not necessarily solely focused on that individual success.
Mm.
And I say that because I want managers and leaders to be cautious about encouraging individual success, that you aren't specifically like pitting people against one another. This goes back to that like competitive nature. You may have someone who has competition as a manager, you may have someone who has competition on your team and they want to be number one. They want to be the best. They want to be recognized for that. And you may be able to have some conversations with them about meeting those competitive needs they have to be number one. But maybe it needs to be based off of what they've done in the past and not trying to beat their coworkers. Maybe it's about bringing that person who has, and I'm picking on competition, totally picking on competition here, because I know that's a drive and a need for some of those who have high competition. Like, this is serious business. Like, they need to know they're number one, and I don't want to diminish that in any way, but maybe having them think of like, we are winning as a team. Like, if I do my best and I'm doing the best, I'm able to help our team win against our competition, against, outside the company, not inside the company. So we're not, like pushing that line of where we're asking them to compete with their coworkers. We just don't want to get in that like icky place.
Yeah. I'm so glad you took that place, because as you started talking about competition, um, I got to think about, can you make this about team success, and
Right.
team being number one versus an
Yes.
individual contributor. I've
Or
seen teams
or
both.
your company be number one versus the competition.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because given my athletic background, coaching
Mm,
kids and playing on my own teams, we've all seen the superstar who
right.
wants to be, score the most number of goals or make the most number of awesome, cool plays, but it really isn't serving the team all that well. So can you get it to refocus on, yes, we want to honor that competitive spirit, um, and we want to be successful at work or
Mm,
on the sports field, but that it's going to take all of us, and
yes.
that it's not just going to be a solo pursuit. So I'm really glad you brought that in.
Yeah.
Um, what are were there other things that you wanted to
I have
mention?
I have some things about like managers just checking their bias, and we talked about this
Yeah.
before. And I don't want to pick on managers for that, but I do think if you lead with, like influencing, executing, strategic thinking, relationship building, if you lead with a specific domain, you have a natural tendency to encourage, acknowledge, and appreciate those who have that same drive or blend. And so if it's okay, like, would it be all right to like give some examples about that?
I mean, it'd be great for our listeners.
Okay. So it's specifically like the high executing, and I am guilty of this in the past. So it is something that I constantly need to be like keeping at the forefront. So being high and executing, you have a natural tendency to encourage, acknowledge, and appreciate those who are motivated by getting things done. Get those other doers. So I'm just saying, be careful not to show favoritism to these that just appear to be working hard. As we know, we've talked about this before in some of our last episodes around burnout and other things. The long hours, the in early, leave late, yes, they are working, and they're working a lot of hours, but are they being productive? And are they working smarter or harder in this case? So you may want to enlist the help of some relationship building people on your team to encourage the teamwork with the executors. Executors, like myself, like Chad, because you have some high executing ones as well.
I do.
We build really strong bonds when we work together with others to accomplish things. So that, like, working hard, rolling up our sleeves, digging in, we love to do that with other people, and when they're like on the same page as us, and we can have success together. So I would say, if you have one of these, high executors, rather than just like praising them for working 1 million hours a week, maybe it's time that they get some help. Like, maybe we give them some support so that they can feel like they're doing something and accomplishing things together. High strategic thinking managers, so they will encourage, appreciate, and acknowledge the others who are like the thinkers. These are the ones who are coming up with the ideas. Again, be careful about the favoritism for only those who have the ideas. While the list of ideas seems great, they might not all be winners. And we've had other people with strategic thinking talents and ideation and other, one of those things say that they don't always know when their idea is not great. Like, they're just coming up with them. So maybe enlist the help of some of your doers, some of your executing team members, to help bring the team together. So what could we accomplish based on these ideas? What might honestly be like doable? And in the time available, because the executors are all about that, like getting stuff done in the time. In the high influencers, again, we're gonna look to, maybe we're even looking at pushing to see who's making the difference. Those are the people that we're acknowledging, like who are the ones who are like jumping to get things started or ready to win. And I would I would just be careful not to lean too heavily on the desire to win, or get started or push others along. We talk a lot about that, like pushing others versus like bringing them along. Maybe again, looking to your relationship building teammates to help encourage some of those bonds between the team members working together. These high relationship building talents can be the thermostat, like reading the temperature of the team's willingness to get on board quickly. So if you are high influencing, you have some others who are high influencing who want to push others along, your relationship building people are going to help you understand, like, who's feeling reluctant, who is maybe not going to be on board so quickly, and what can we do to bring them into, what we're doing and get on board, so that we're not leaving anybody behind, but we're also not either dragging them kicking or screaming or pushing really too hard. And then the relationship builders, again, like if you're a high relationship builder, you're going to be looking at doing lots of team activities, and those are the things that you're going to encourage or want to be supportive of. And just be careful not to spend so much time building the team and doing the feel-good stuff that you miss or maybe even alienate those who want to get things done, those who want to get things started, or those who have the ideas. Really bringing the team together, using each other and understanding how we can use our teammates to help make these great partnerships that Chad was talking about too. Like, whether you're creating them on your own or they're happening because people work together. I just think we just want our managers to be really careful not to get caught in their bias and only see those acknowledgments of those who are like them.
Yeah. First of all, great thoughts, Jen.
Okay.
As you're
Thanks.
talking, I I started to see some threads about some things we've talked about in this podcast already, but also in our recognition
Mm,
episode about sort of the biases and where you put your attention. What I found
yeah.
interesting is when I brought up the idea of building best friendships based on whether you share similar themes or different themes. I think what you just highlighted goes to that point of
It does.
and it's not even the leaders, like the people within the team. Your best friend doesn't have to be your leader. It's the leader can help encourage those friendships, but
Yes.
they, as a leader, you can be looking to see, oh, are there complementary themes that
Mhm.
these two people could really, make great things happen
Yeah.
because you put them together, or they could be looking at, can two people with very similar themes be put together and develop a friendship based on a shared work experience? So it's just an interesting sort of Venn diagram of biasing and the recognition piece that we've talked
Right.
about in the previous episode, the building friendships, the themes, and how they all kind of come together. Um,
Hmm.
I think you're smart to point out that leaders shouldn't just be trying to pair similar themes together. Oh,
Right.
they're both executing. Let's put them together, because maybe that's too much too much oil or too much water.
they
They're
they
not
might love
gonna.
it, right,
They
they
might love.
might love it, but are we getting things farther, or are we like stuck in the minutia then, like we're
Right.
bringing some of those other themes in, and I think that's what we both have loved about talents, is like seeing the differences and how amazing that can
Yeah.
make the team when we're actually different because we're using each other
Yeah.
for success.
and,
Yeah.
and building friendships
Yeah.
on that basis. And again, we've talked
Yeah.
about a lot of other factors that go into building a friendship and a work relationship. We've talked about the trust, talked about the encouraging, talked about the
Yeah.
supportive nature of being an advocate, etc. But I think a lot of your points go really well to how leaders can help friendships maybe develop. And I think that's where
100%.
I wanted to sort of what you did kind of set up some of the points I wanted to make
Good.
for leaders out there. One of the ones that I had on my mind, and you've already covered it, so I'm not going to go super deep, but looking for those pairings of strengths, right? Look for ways to pair up team members to complete certain tasks. Doing this can create friendships. You've already nailed that. So I'm just gonna
Okay.
cover my sort of other 2 points for leaders to think about, so
All
that they
right.
leave with three things. Um, One is to just build a shared understanding of peers, and this isn't so much about themes as it is just about understanding each other's backgrounds.
Oh,
Looking
good.
outside of the strengths world, Patrick Lencioni, who's famous for the
Yep.
Five Dysfunctions of a Team book, he has a great activity. It's been mirrored by a couple others, but he calls it a personal histories exercise. Share kind of like, where did you grow up? How many siblings do you have? What kind of high school did you go to? What was your family life like? What were you interested in, back when you were, kindergartner, teenager, just building that shared understanding of
Hmm.
where people are coming from can improve the friendships. It's building that depth that we've already alluded to. So
Yeah.
that's one activity to think about, especially if you're
Like
a new
that one.
leader or trying to get some new team members to understand each other a little bit better. It's a great way to start friendships. And even if just two people want to take it on, if they're trying to figure each other out, okay, do a personal history exercise. So there's
Yeah, I
one.
love that one.
And then the other big one, and there are a couple points under this, but really building shared moments. That's when friendships really develop, right? We've shared something in common, and so now we have that experience to go back to, and it can be sort of a well of inspiration. So Gallup actually has a couple suggestions about how to sort of build those shared moments, and we'll put a link to this resource in the show notes. But look for the opportunities to get teams together for just friendship building exercise, events, and it
Yep.
doesn't always have to happen at the office. But maybe it happens during work time, but you make time for those friendship building opportunities.
Yeah.
Um, Plan for that time to socialize when it might not impact your customers or clients or
Right.
whoever you're actually taking care of. Um, but even spending 5 minutes during a group meeting, and I'm not talking about sort of the cheesy icebreaker stuff. I'm just talking about
Right.
how can you build some connection and socialization. One of the suggestions out of the Gallup resources, maybe it's celebrating work anniversaries or uh, you know building on the
Right.
recognition episode. Maybe it's you take time to recognize a couple people and build some camaraderie around that and what you've accomplished together. And then oftentimes, kind of expanding upon that, make sure you're taking time away from the office to take a break together. Maybe it's just you go on a 1 day hike. We here in Vermont are blessed with
Yeah.
some amazing nature around us. I've seen some local organizations via LinkedIn um, taking their staff on a hike up our tallest mountain. And
Nice.
tallest mountains out where you live are a very different thing than where we are. Your tall mountains take a couple days to climb. Ours you can do a couple hours.
Right.
But taking that time away and just having an experience with your coworkers that is not work focused can build those friendships, and you never know where that sort of bestie might come from in terms of that
Yeah.
experience. So
I love
sort of,
that, Chad.
yeah,
I want to just add to that too, like as an executor, like we talked about this, like achievers don't really celebrate success, right? So doing this stuff, like it is not top of mind for me. So as a manager, if you struggle to keep these, like doing things that are good to bring the team together, to like find these moments where you can build some shared experiences, if that's not in your wheelhouse, if that's not something you're used to doing, look to your team and your relationship builders. Who is doing this naturally and tap into them? Would they be interested in planning an outing for the team? Like I've had managers in the past do that with, we had some really great relationship building people on a team I was part of. And this person specifically took over all of the events. They came up with what we're doing for Christmases, like what we're going to do for, all the different like team events. We had so much money for our team that we could spend doing team events, and they made amazing events for us. And it brought us together in really wonderful ways that I don't think would happen just in the process of doing the work. So if that's not in your wheelhouse, don't worry, don't fret. Like you can find someone who can help you do this so that it's not all on your shoulders to be the one coming up with this like amazing fun event that everyone's going to like. Yeah, I love these ideas, Chad.
Yeah. So what are your sort of takeaways? What would you want to offer up as sort of your final thoughts on this as we send our listeners off to their holiday festivities and think about their new year?
Right. I'm going to start with a good one, which is like, be the best friend you wish you had. So if you want a best friend at work, be a best friend to someone else at work. Like be that person to someone else, encourage them and be beside them, speak for them if they're not in the room, speak up for them if somebody's bad mouthing them, just be the person that you really wish you had. And then I'm going to take it a little on the negative side too, that like the toxic workplace stuff. Managers, team members, anybody, if you see it, put a stop to it immediately. Nothing soils a good workplace like letting some bad behavior just fester. So whatever you can do to encourage others and put a stop to some of the not good activities that happen in the workplace, do whatever you can to just be the best friend and try not to be the super villain in your company.
Okay, great first thought. I'm going to add to your
about
list.
you.
Yeah, so I'm going to add two just to kind of offer some bookends on some of the things that we talked about at the very beginning. I think it's really important as we close out this episode to keep in mind that best friend doesn't mean your absolute best friend in the entire world.
Right.
We've talked about sort of the difference between best friend at work versus best friend in the rest of your social circle.
Yep.
So just being very clear on that there is an importance about using that word best when we're thinking about employee engagement and really managing that, because engaged employees are far more productive and happier, and they stay longer, and loyalty is better, and customer treatment's better. So there is a value to thinking about that word best, but that don't overdo the term. So just keep that in mind. And that there is a serious value to finding a best friend at work. Jen's already pointed out that the toxicity starts to dissipate or go away if you have more of those best friend relationships. And I'll also just go back to something I've already mentioned, which is transactional work. Just passing papers from one colleague to another because you don't want to get too close, that gets super lonely. And in this day and age, we need to battle against isolation and think more about how we can holistically support one another. So those are our thoughts. As with any of our episodes, we encourage those of you who listen to send us comments, send us questions, comment on wherever you find this podcast, either Acast or LinkedIn or YouTube. As you consider this episode, I'm going to keep encouraging you to keep playing to your strengths and be the best friend you can be at work.
Love that. And be uniquely you.
If you like this episode, we encourage you to like, follow, and subscribe to wherever you find your podcasts.